Hello. So I don't know if you've heard of this thing. It's a Netflix series called Green Eggs and Ham, and I don't think I ever talked about it here on the channel. I considered talking about it when I was watching season 1, and to be honest, I was just having an absolutely terrible time. I hated the premise. I hated the characters. I thought that absolutely everyone in the show was miscast, and the premise, each arc, it just felt so cliche, so standard. It felt incredibly predictable. It just was not a fun watch for me. And I was in the process of making a video about it way back when, and I just felt like, you know what? No, let's maybe save some of that negativity and just not say anything. Maybe that's better. Then a few days ago, I saw on Netflix, oh look, there's season 2 out of nowhere. So just to clarify, season 1 was released back in 2019, and now we're getting season 2, which they call something semi-clever, like second course, second help, and something like that. Just came out here in 2022. And this is somewhat interesting because in general, I guess seasons don't mean anything anymore. Have you noticed that? We've talked about plenty of Netflix shows, specifically animated Netflix shows that turn out multiple seasons within the same year, Centaur World, Kid Cosmic. And then we have these other shows, animated or otherwise, that are just stretching things way out. So what, roughly 3 years-ish between seasons of Green Eggs and Ham. And then I saw that Barry is getting a season 3. Season 2 of Barry came out in like 2018, quite a while ago, and they're just like, okay, we're bringing it back. And I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. It's just a major shift in the television landscape, which we can barely call the television landscape anymore because so much of it is located on streaming services now. It could potentially even be a positive change, the idea that, oh, you can bring a show back, you can give a production team some kind of a break. Maybe they're working on other projects, they need to get talent back over a longer period of time. Who knows? So that's just a quick observation I wanted to lead with here, but so long story short, we have season 2 of Green Eggs and Ham, a show that I don't like, or at least I really didn't like season 1 at all. Oh my goodness. So let me introduce this to you if you're not familiar for some reason. Green Eggs and Ham was a book from Dr. Seuss, a guy who was a visual artist and did some very interesting work outside of his children's books. And Green Eggs and Ham is one of the most famous. It happens to be one of my least favorite Dr. Seuss books, but hey, it's got the name recognition. This comes from Warner Brothers. Apparently they just happened to already have the rights, I suppose, in some form. So they said, okay, all that matters today is name recognition, properties that people are already familiar with. So here we go. Make something out of Green Eggs and Ham, this really short children's book about trying new things. We got it. I was not happy with it. Let me introduce you to the main cast. Michael Douglas plays Guy Am I, character who did not have a name in the original book. I don't think he's right for the role. Just super gruff 100% of the time. Doesn't feel like a good fit. Doesn't feel like he knows where he is or like he has any sort of chemistry with any other character. He's just kind of one note for me, even after he sort of has his personal transformations and stuff. Sam I Am is played by Adam Devine, and Lordy, my goodness, I just don't think it works, period. I'm sorry. Feel free to disagree. I just think he's playing annoying, and it doesn't help that most of the dialogue in the show, including in season 2, which I'll get to soon enough, is kind of just junk. Like, it's kind of just incredibly standard TV writing. And that whole first season is like, oh, Sam he wants a friend. He's like a con man, but he wants a friend, and it kind of ends up being like a midnight run situation between him and Guy, and they're going on this wacky adventure, and maybe by the end of it, they'll see each other in a different light. Diane Keaton plays Lady. The character's name is Michelle, because why not? I could have sworn it was Susan Sarandon at first. Is this like a Mandela effect thing? And one of my least favorite performances across both seasons is Alana Glazer as E.B. And here's the issue with this performance, in my opinion. Alana Glazer is a very skilled performer. We know this. Broad City was basically like a generation-defining comedy show. It was just great, and it was obviously the breakout role for both Alana Glazer and Abby Jacobson. And in the years since Broad City, both Abby Jacobson and Alana Glazer have continued to have careers. I would say they've both been generally quite successful. However, in terms of Alana Glazer's more recent work, I don't quite see like a direction to to it. Abby Jacobson has specialized quite heavily in voice acting. And I don't know, Alana Glazer, she was in After Party. She's been doing stand-up stuff. And she's playing EB in Green Eggs and Ham, and one of my biggest issues here is that the character she's playing is, it's hard to tell because this is a wacky fantasy world and we don't know what people look like at certain ages and stuff. I would guess this character is supposed to be like 10 to 12 years old. If you're really stretching, you could maybe say like 14. And you might argue that Alana Glazer, just like a sort of her standard delivery voice, like that could fit a character that's sort of younger. She seems to be putting on some weird, slightly higher pitched thing. It's inflected in a different way, and it sounds strange to me. And this is not me trying to say like, oh, Alana Glazer should only be playing parts, even voice acting parts that are like generally her age. No, that's not really the case. But this specifically, this is a really young character. We're talking about like a child here, and somehow I just don't think the voice performance measures up at all. It just kind of feels awkward, and in fact it pulls me out of a lot of scenes because I just hear her voice and I hear the voice of an adult person, and it just doesn't it doesn't match, it doesn't mesh. These individual actors have obviously all done good work before, and then I thought of Adam Devine and I was like, well, maybe not everyone. But I just think a lot of these performances are just, it doesn't quite work for me. And it also brings into question, when paired with the dialogue, who is this show for? And why is that audience supposed to care about it? I think it has a rating of like TVY7, so sure. Fine. Maybe it's mostly meant for younger children. It's based on Dr. Seuss stuff. It's all very colorful and whimsical for the most part, except for the stuff that seems more like an adult sense of humor or just like an adult approach to story and adventure. The show has always been on shaky ground, at least in terms of my perspective on it. And going into season 2, I really had very low expectations. And to be honest, I was not planning on finishing the season. Maybe a few episodes that I could stand, and these are like 28-minute episodes. They're not super short. 10 episodes in the second season. Like this is a lot, and this is one thing I'll say before I move on to some positive things about the show. It doesn't need to be a show. It doesn't need to be a series, and this is something that I think a lot of us have been sort of yelling, especially at Netflix over the past, 5 to 7 years, is that every single thing you greenlight does not need to be a series. It doesn't need to be a simple story that you stretch out and pad out so much. So that what? So that you can encourage binge watching? Or is it just like they want to seem like they're offering more when they can offer a series as opposed to just offering a movie for that property? Is it more likely for a viewer to give a show a chance and get sucked in as opposed to seeing a movie and just saying, nah, I'm not gonna touch that. That's 2 hours. I'm not gonna just waste 2 hours on something I might not like. But oh, here's a show. I only have to waste half an hour if I don't like it. And if I do like it, wow, there's so much more to enjoy. I don't understand that process. I don't understand the motivation to turn absolutely everything into a show when it could have worked as a much shorter story. And here, yep, sorry, that is the case. It was certainly the case with the first season, much more so in fact. Boy, does that one drag on. Season 2, they kind of make better use of their time. It's still very long, and I do not recommend that anybody watches season 2 of Green Eggs and Ham in one sitting. It was not a pleasant experience. I think that even if you're really enjoying the show, it would just feel like, please get on with it. Please get on with it. We know how this is going to end. Please don't waste our time. But they do waste quite a bit of your time. However, oh boy, and this is the smoking gun. This is the jack of spades up the old sleeve, as we used to say in the old country. The visuals are very nice. The visuals and the animation of this animated show are really not that bad. And this is something that I had a hard time sort of accepting or really focusing on when watching season 1, is just because I was so annoyed and having such a terrible time. I didn't pay much attention to the visuals. And here in season 2, which I did enjoy enjoy much more overall. It was a more positive experience. I think it's a much better season of show than the first one, but I really did take notice of it here, and I was actually enjoying it, especially for like the second half of season 2. It's just kind of nice. I don't know the name of the studio that actually did the animation here off by heart. Oh, here it is. Here they are on the screen. Clap, everybody. Clap. It's time to clap, because these people at this studio did a wonderful job of just production design, art direction, and flat out just the animation process, the way that characters move around. Yes, this is hand animated stuff. This is not cheap, junky television animation where they're just moving with their joints and everything and it looks like paper dolls. No, they're actually being drawn over and over again to look like they're moving, and it's pretty darn good. And even just the way in which they've managed to not even evolve necessarily, but to like extrapolate from that core Dr. Seuss style and world that so many of us became familiar with as kids, they do a pretty good job of turning that into a more fleshed out reality. The types of gadgets you would see, the type of architecture you would see, potentially even the types of societies you would see, and the people and the creatures. Like it's actually pretty darn good. Everything has this nice little texture that makes it look a little bit different from a lot of other animated television stuff. It's not all just completely flat color. The shading is quite nice, and in certain moments with certain lighting, it can look very dramatic, which can be very useful at key story points. That is by far the most positive aspect that I can talk about here, is just how the show presents itself, specifically in terms of visuals, animation. Something I don't like about the presentation is the music side of things. The score is fine. It's Mickey Mousing score, wacky, follows the action very closely. Now, the licensed music is a very different story. And I'm not going to put up the music supervisor's name on the screen. Typically, the music supervisor is the person who helps pick out licensed music for a movie or a show. They're key to that process, but every production is different. It's possible that someone involved in the production really shoehorned or really pressured this person to put certain tracks in, or who knows, maybe they weren't getting paid all that well, so they were like, I'm just gonna phone this in and call it a day and go home. I don't know. I think the choices for licensed music in this show, in both seasons, are absolutely horrible, like real bad. And they even make me question who the team behind the show thought that they were making it for, because so much of this stuff falls into the category of like adult easy listening. Do you know what I mean? Very bad choices for the songs, either just junky, nameless, faceless pop that I have no interest in hearing anywhere. They just make me feel like I'm trapped in a J.C. Penney's for eternity. Not a fan. And then one of the instances where they decided not to use some weird adult contemporary music, they chose to use Strangers by the Kinks. Now this is a fine song. I'm cool with the Kinks, it's a-okay, but if you watch some movies and if you've been around this track for a little while, you'll know that this song was used extremely prominently in one of the most memorable sequences from a movie called The Darjeeling Limited. And at least for myself, that song is so completely ingrained with that scene and the visuals of that scene that hearing it anywhere else just feels misplaced. It doesn't feel like it's being used well. So part of it is the nostalgia and my personal associations there, but also like that's part of the job of a music supervisor, is if someone else has used the exact same song for something else and for a completely different project, maybe stay away from it. Maybe find an alternative that has sort of a similar tone or vibe that other people won't immediately associate with the better work that it was used in. Sorry, that's my 2 cents on the licensed music. Now, season 1 was clearly based on Green Eggs and Ham, the book itself, at least loosely. It's one of those kind of junky modernizations, like how can we stretch this out? This season is very much based on what I would say is a far less known Dr. Seuss work called the Butter Battle Book, which is very fun to say. And basically this book was metaphor for the Cold War specifically, or just anti-war messaging in a more general sense. Two nations who have this extremely minor ideological, cultural difference are at war forever, and they just keep, the arms race continues. They continue to build stronger and stronger weapons until at some point they just have two unbeatable weapons squaring off against each other, and everyone's miserable. It's great. It's very well executed. It's a great book. Now, I guess we could have a debate about whether or not that was the best choice for something being released right now, given current world events. And then we can also say, well, this wasn't produced over the last month or two. They've probably been working on this for quite a long time. They did not know that the current world events would be the current world events. So you can't blame them for that. I feel like we see one too many mushroom clouds in this season of a wacky children's show to not question that decision, at least to some degree. It does feel difficult to watch. And also, and I'm not implying that, the team behind the show was trying to make comparisons between our actual situation with Ukraine and Russia. No, absolutely not. But it's very hard to watch this without thinking, oh, this is a very real thing that is destroying lives. That comparison was not intended at all by the team behind the show. I can't imagine that was ever in their plans. It's unfortunate, the release timing, I suppose, and maybe they just figured, well, the ultimate message here is, hey, why can't we all just get along? So they figure, well, that's fine. This is an anti-war thing. Cool. Why not go ahead and release it right now? Yeah, I don't know. Kind of works, kind of doesn't for me. It does kind of, it's another source of distraction, just current events. It's another thing that kind of pulled me out of the experience of just watching and enjoying the show. This ties into how story is approached throughout season 2 of the show. And when I say standard, if you've watched any amount of children's media, if you've just watched movies in general that sort of play to general audiences, you know what's going to happen with basically every plot line. I do appreciate that there are multiple sort of storylines in here focused around different characters. It gives you a nice breather from some of the worst characters in the show. So I do appreciate that in a way. Sort of like hopping on a merry-go-round, but you pick a different horse every time so you don't get quite as tired of it. But here, this story, even dialogue, you can just predict dialogue before it comes out of their mouths. Schemes of certain characters, twist villains. One of our catalysts for this season that just sort of falls off for the second half of the show is that Sam, and I don't think this is a spoiler because it's a setup, Sam wants to find his biological mother, but I have a hunch that his mom might not be what he expected. And boy, oh boy, I'm tired. And it's not just that I get tired of seeing the same story setups all the time, or the same subject matter. No, it will never be wrong or overdone to have this sort of storyline of a person seeking out their biological parents. No, it's absurd to say that certain stories just stop being completely relevant. It's certainly something that's so personal and emotionally volatile as something like that. But the way to keep it fresh is, well, you keep it fresh, you approach it in a different way, you execute it in a different way. And I don't get that from any one of the storylines that play out in this show, in either season. It just feels like many things I've seen before, but with this sort of saving grace of fun visuals and occasionally delightful gadgets or concepts. In fact, one of my favorite episodes basically has this pretty intense sci-fi concept at the center of it, and ultimately that concept serves as a way to illustrate growth and progression between two of our characters. That's excellent. That's really good. But most of the time, I just feel pluck these characters and these storylines out of this show and put them in just a real world setting. There's no translation issue. It would just play out in exactly the same way. And to me, that feels like a downside when we're in a magical Dr. Seuss world. I feel like it could be more, but I think I need to wind things down. A general impression, if they weren't already clear, season 2 is far superior to season 1 of Green Eggs and Ham. The casting and voice acting, I'm sorry, I really didn't enjoy it more or less across the board. Even if people are trying, it didn't quite work out for me. Visuals and animation, lovely. Oh, surprisingly lovely. A breath of sort of fresh air, and then story and messaging, yeah, misplaced or just plain mediocre. And that's sort of it. Do I recommend it? If you got some time, you really need something to watch. If you just want to get a taste for the visuals, absolutely go ahead. Skip right over season 1. You do not need anything there. Don't worry about it. As for whether they're going to do more, who knows? They can just decide anytime. They could decide a couple months from now, get it into production. They could wait 5 or 6 years. They could wait 10 years and decide to do more. That's just the landscape that we're in right now. But for now, that's the recent season. Those are the new episodes, and those are my thoughts. And I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for stopping by.
Domino stars are abominable. O-U-T out, O-U-T out. That all status symbol is O-U-T.